Um, Hello, Mike. Thank you for joining us for MCSC 2022. Speaking of drifting clouds, do you think there's a perfect cyberstorm up on us?
Well, thank you, Alex. That's a fantastic question. Um, really, in my opinion, there's three global trends that we see happening today that are creating this perfect storm of cyber risk. And it's just the tip of the iceberg. Now, each of these three trends we see happening, um, by themselves, they are very significant. But when you put them all together, it creates this unbelievable storm of risk to the globe, to the world. The first one is these mounting tensions we see between world powers and the increasingly digital nature of modern warfare. The collateral damage from this war, the digital war, is global, unpredictable, and pervasive. The second one is we have this e-revolution, I like to call it, happening in the logistics, automotive, and transportation industries. And together with that, we have this proliferation of smart cities, intelligent enterprises, and digital ports. And because of this, our attack surface is growing exponentially, and there's more paths for this digital collateral damage to propagate rapidly through the globe. And then together, if that's not enough, you add in this global pandemic. Yeah, so the global pandemic itself has accelerated remote work paradigms and cloud adoption 10 years beyond where we were ready to face. And most institutions and people, they really weren't ready for this, and threat actors are rapidly exploiting this. Now, I like to use an illustration of a hurricane to help explain what I mean here, because there's also some opportunity. I grew up in Texas and in Florida, and on a regular basis, almost yearly it seemed, we were faced with hurricanes. Yeah. Now, what happens when a hurricane's coming? Well, you put up boards on your windows, you tie down things in the yard, you bring in things, you take your valuables and you secure them. You prepare for that storm, and you don't just prepare yourself, you help your neighbor also prepare. So the whole community, they come together to prepare for this storm, to weather it together. And after it comes, they share food and they help each other get through the aftermath. And so this is something, although we see this storm coming, if we come together and we help each other prepare for it, then we actually can generate opportunity out of this. Now let's talk about that first trend I mentioned. Okay, that first trend is this tension, this mounting tension between world powers. We see what's happening with Russia and with the Ukraine, and this increasingly digital nature of warfare is something significant. Cyber really is the tool of choice, especially during recent and these emerging conflicts. I come from a military background, and there's basically two modes of conflict, right? You have a direct frontal attack, and then you have this covert, subversive, and undercover kind of attack. And I like to use an illustration also to explain that. Imagine a man standing on the front line. He's got his full body armor on. He's got his rifle. He's got his night vision on. He's watching the front line. He's watching for the enemy for that frontal attack. Now, while he's standing there, he suddenly finds himself on the ground and then in the hospital. And he asks the doctor, "Hey, what happened?" Yeah, I was ready. I was armored up. I was geared up. I was paying attention. I was looking for that attack. And the doctor said, "Yeah, but in those rocks you were hiding in, there was a snake and he bit you in the leg and you almost died." And so we have to really be aware of these snakes in the rocks. Yeah, so troops, they're massing on the borders, but the digital warfare is already raging. Threat actors are infiltrating targets now. They're hiding, they're putting their digital snakes in the rock, waiting for that opportunity to be called to action. And what do these digital snakes look like? They look like increased ransomware activity that you see happening with Russia, China, North Korea, Iran. You see upward trends in digital blackmail, fraud, deep fakes, and social media tampering. Why? Because they need to fund this war effort, and they're going to get money from wherever they can. They also need to discredit government, institutions, and individuals. So there's an information operations piece of this digital warfare. So they're hacking social media, they're hacking media outlets, they're doing anything they can to get in and hide those snakes in the rocks. Now, why is this important? Well, digital warfare, it has global collateral damage. We all know the Merck Sharpen Dome incident, don't we? From NotPetya. Yeah, this NotPetya incident in Merck Sharp and Dome was caused by the digital conflict of Russia and Ukraine. It was collateral damage. In fact, the most costly cyber attack in history was actually caused by collateral damage from a digital warfare. It was not a direct attack on that company, but hundreds of companies and industries were impacted by this. And it's not just the beginning. We're going to see an increase in collateral damage if we don't take action quickly, decisively, and also collectively. Now, something to keep in mind, the US intelligence believes that Russian cyber criminals targeting the Ukraine can rapidly propagate collateral damage into industries like power and utilities, government, transportation and logistics, international organizations, finance, and also media. Now, not just propagating, but if there are sanctions placed against them to prevent them from taking the action they want, they may very well attack these sanctioning countries in these industries. So the collateral damage is an issue, but also the direct overt attack is also an issue to look at inside the cyberspace. Now, that in and of itself is significant, but that's not all happening. The second trend, this e-revolution in logistics, automotive, transportation, this proliferation of smart homes, smart cities, intelligent enterprises, and digital ports, this plays a role. Yeah, we have an exponential increase of technology devices. What does that mean? That means increased attack surface. That means more rocks to hide those digital snakes. We are more connected and more collaborative than ever before. And that's a fantastic and fine thing. But we are also more vulnerable and more at risk than ever before because of this interconnected phenomenon that's happening. Now, there's more snakes in the rocks, and there's more open pathways for collateral damage to rapidly propagate and even start claiming human life. Think about it. Trains, buses, fully automated, power plants, fully automated, that get hit by this collateral damage. You're not just taking out industry and money, you're taking out human life now. So we must prepare. Now, that's not all. There's additional implications here. There's a race to 5G dominance happening to support this. Now, why is that significant? Because that places increased risk within the supply chains. You see, what do I mean by that? Well, countries are racing to own the infrastructure, to own the 5G dominance, because whoever owns 5G owns business. They own the pathways to giant revenue streams. So think about this. China owns a large percentage of Africa's infrastructure already. China heavily invests in underdeveloped third world countries. Now, if you move your business and your operations into Africa, you need to deal with the complexities of being in Africa because it's a very complex environment. But geographically, you're in Africa, but digitally, you're actually in China. So your cyber strategy has to have two pieces to it. How do I handle what's happening to me kinetically in the real world in Africa, but also being inside China digitally? So our cybersecurity strategies have to have multi dimensions to them because of this. And because this is a race, people are buying components at bulk and they're buying them cheap. Who can I get it from? How fast can I get it from? Well, who's checking those components? Who's checking those devices? What payload is loaded in those devices? Where is that snake in the rocks hiding in our supply chain and our infrastructure during this race? Now, if those two aren't enough, let's just add a global pandemic. Yeah, so the global pandemic leapfrogged us 10 years ahead of where we were ready to be. Home office paradigms, cloud adoption strategies, every institution in the world had to start embracing these, and the vast majority were not ready for it. Many were ready, many were prepared, and those are an example and people to partner with, to learn from. But those who weren't ready created gaps. They created holes within their cybersecurity strategy, within their protection layers. And the threat actors, they saw it and they exploited this greatly. Ease of access to vulnerable homes and network systems. And what am I going to get there? Well, I'm going to get information about people that I can blackmail them, I can extort them, I can impersonate them. So it opened up the door to unprecedented levels of exploitation. And that's going to continue to increase as this phenomenon rolls forward. Now, this is not all doom and gloom I'm talking about here, right? So with any storm, we have opportunity, like I mentioned in the beginning. So we have the chance to build global strategic partnerships with economic, regulatory, and trade leaders, because technology is not the only solution. We can help each other across countries, across agencies, across industries to really weather this storm together, to share ideas, to share innovation, to collaborate and not compete when it comes to protecting ourselves from these criminals and what's happening in this storm. And these political and regulatory allies, I like to explain that as circling the wagons. A former brigade commander, a very good friend of mine, he used to always say, hey, when you circle the wagons, the guns point out, not in. So we can't be shooting each other and competing against each other in the cyber industry. We need to partner with each other to face that common enemy. Another opportunity we have is to engage board members, business leaders, and supply chain partners as risk owners. Cyber is a hot topic. Cyber is a business function. It is not a function of technology. It is a function of business directly related to quality and risk. So we can help businesses and governments and agencies identify their crown jewels, their key assets, where to invest and prioritize their investment, and how to help others, because these cyber criminals and threat actors, they move between industries. So if something's happening in one industry, we can learn from it and partner for the next industry and prepare for what's coming in the tactics they use. Now, making business and encouraging business to own cyber and not technology leaders to own cyber gives a much different narrative. It helps unlock innovation. It helps open new markets. It helps bring visibility into risks that weren't known before, so that these new perspectives help us to unlock new innovation and unlock new markets in a safe and a prepared way. And this whole e-revolution phenomenon I talked about earlier, it creates a need for certified, hardened, and cyber resilient suppliers. That niche, that need can be filled if we partner together in the supply chain industry to think about how do we protect not our customers, not our clients, but those end consumers, those lives who depend on resilient and hardened technologies and approaches. Yeah, this niche can be filled, and it generates fantastic opportunity within the industries. And maybe finally, our training initiatives. We train the office, we train the employees, but do we train the families and the children? Yeah, so the families and children, those are our future employees and future leaders. You have huge STEM initiatives across different countries to really build up capacity and capability in technology space. Let's also help people understand the value of cyber within these initiatives. Work and home have this very fuzzy boundary, so we can help people learn now how to secure themselves, how to secure their children in their schools, in their daily lives. And that propagates to future leaders who understand this storm and are prepared to weather it. They're not surprised by it. So really, if we partner together to weather the storm, we open up new markets, we build alliances, we invest in future leaders, and we are ready not just to weather the storm, but to grow from the storm, to learn from it, to innovate from it. So if we are aware that the world is changing and the storm is coming, if we understand there are snakes in the rocks that we need to be careful of, and if we build the right partnerships, coalitions, and investments, we can really bring cyber forward into a business function that opens up a whole world of possibilities. And personally, I think the Munich Cybersecurity Conference is the ideal forum to build these coalitions that we need to weather this digital storm that's coming. So I encourage each of you, everybody, reach out, join working groups you've never even thought of joining before, build new coalitions, form alliances, not just within your industry, but across industries and across countries on a global scale. When you do this, you will certainly grow from it, and so will we together. What are your thoughts?
Fantastic, Mike. This was highly interesting and would lead to so many follow-on questions, but I'll just focus on one, given the fact that you've been a CISO yourself and you're still advising a lot of CIOs and CISOs out there. There many times, of course, there is this claim, hey, cyber needs a seat at the board table, and at the board level, and they really need to understand it. But I mean, most businesses, the CISO is not at the board level. He might be reporting to the CFO or CISO or CIO. So I'm always wondering, what are your thoughts about that? Has everybody not understood it, or should the CISO, in fact, not be a level one executive, but rather, it's fine if he or she reports into a level one position?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Alex, and it's a kind of a passionate topic of mine. The CISOs of yesterday and some of today aren't ready for a boardroom seat. A lot of companies recruit technical CISOs. So a lot of companies still view cyber and security as a technology function. What needs to happen is a growth in leadership acumen, business acumen, leadership capabilities, a development of CISOs to be leaders of people, leaders of organizations, understanding business dynamics and business risk. And when that phenomenon increases, because it's happening today, you're getting many more CISOs who are leaders from industry, who are trained in certain business aspects. In technology is their secondary strength. And when you have CISOs of this nature, they absolutely need to be at that boardroom table, sitting there with a seat at the board, but not owning cyber. Yeah. So not how can you adopt what I give you as cyber? No, more saying you own cyber, you own this risk. So how can I help you mitigate that risk that you own? Because I'm here to help you mitigate that risk and grow your business and to help you move into industries that you want to explore and grow in a safe and manageable way. So I think as the dialogue shifts to a risk-based conversation with business leaders, you're going to see a natural evolution of the CISOs into the boardroom. But if they're not prepared and trained for it, they're talking about digital, they're talking about threat intelligence, they're talking about malware hacks. They're going to lose the board members. Yeah, it's got to be a conversation in the language the board understands and which resonates with them, which basically boils down to EBIT margin, shareholder satisfaction, and consumer safety and quality. Yeah, and when you're able to have those conversations, the CISO should definitely be at the board. But until he's ready, sitting with the CIO or the CFO is a great opportunity to grow them and build them towards that level. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, very interesting. Now, a more technically oriented one, and that's my final question for today. And once again, thank you for taking the time. When you were a CISO at Merck, and maybe in prior positions, what's your position on OT IT security? I mean, a lot of these OT systems today are isolated from the IT, but there's, of course, this growing trend, as you said yourself earlier, when we were talking about the perfect storm of connecting everything. So are you more in favor of air gapping all these OT systems, or do you think it's inevitable that everything needs to be connected, and it's actually possible with the technology that is out there today?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of zero trust networks and network segmentation, but I'm also a big fan of risk-based conversations and doing what makes sense. Yeah, so I won't automatically say segregate everything OT from everything IT because it may not make sense the way that particular business operates. Yeah, you've got to have this conversation about the risk, about the benefit, about the amount of revenue involved. So if it costs you millions a day to shut it down and upgrade it to mitigate a risk of a couple of million for a year, it's a bad investment. Yeah. So you've really got to understand what makes that company tick. Yeah. What's important in terms of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The reason I mentioned that, so I had one of my clients who's big in the generics market, right? And when I looked at their cybersecurity strategy, including how they interacted with the shop floor, they were very heavy on confidentiality. Then I asked them, what kind of IP do you have? And they had virtually no IP. Their business model was based on availability. They cannot afford, as a generics company, they cannot afford to have empty shelf space. Yeah, so really their key cyber element was availability at the highest level. So how do you keep those? What's their business continuity plan? What's their survivability plan? How do they keep those stations and those segments running in the production because they can't afford empty shelf space? So it changes the strategy completely and the dialogue about what risk to address with your cyber strategy. And that's where you figure out how to handle the OT IT connectivity is based on what threat factors and what kind of risk factors you need to address for the profitability of your business and your organization.
Okay, thank you.